Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Guys and Magic. This is Hunter and Shane. Say what up, Shane.
What's up, nerds?
We are back. This time, we're taking a look at the $100 upgrade to the Precon Commander deck of Elven Council. That is the new Precon deck from Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. It is the new set, all Lord of the Rings themed. But, Shane, you had the opportunity to do the upgrade for this deck. Why don't you talk about the Commander, what you're doing with the deck, and how it runs?
Of course, the face commander of this deck is Galadriel, Elven-Queen. She cares about elves, so we're going to build this into a whole make elves go wide and beat your opponent.
I love it. Elves go wide.
It's really weird, right? Elves never go wide. It's interesting though, because I was looking at your list and my list, and it kind of just feels like they're similar decks. Yours just cared about humans, and mine cares about elves. So it's gonna be kind of similar.
I'm excited to see when we play against each other.
Me too. But I'll just jump into the deck. The face commander of this deck is Galadriel, Elven-Queen. She's 2, a green and a blue, for a 4/5 elf noble. She has Will of the Council, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if another elf entered the battlefield under your control this turn, starting with you, each player votes for Dominion or Guidance. If Dominion gets more votes, the ring tempts you. Then you put a 1/1 counter on your ring bearer. If Guidance gets more votes or vote is tied, you draw a card. So it is going to be a kind of like a votey deck, but there's no real way to whiff here, which is good because either your opponents are letting you get tempted by the ring and you get a +1/+1, or they're going to let you draw a card. So I don't really think there's any downside here.
Doesn't seem like there's any downside. It seems like two upsides there.
Yeah. The backup commander for this deck is Gandalf, Westward Voyager. He's 3, a green and a blue, for a 5/5 Avatar Wizard. It says whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, each opponent reveals a top card of their library. If any of those cards share the same card type with the spell, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And each opponent draws a card. Otherwise, you draw a card. A lot of stuff going on with that guy. He's a cool card. I do think that it is a bit of a different lane, though. It's going to be more caring about larger spells, which could be a whole different deck on its own. But we are going to stick with Galadriel and build around her.
Yeah, it seems like two very different commanders you're going with, but I like the elf.
I do too.
So let's go ahead and start with your additions to the deck. Shane, what are we adding to make this deck better?
Well, ever since you brought it up, I kind of wish the same thing you do. Looked around from the set that's also coming out with this, so that being the Lord of the Rings set, and I wanted to see if there's any cards that I could just throw in there automatically. And since we are playing a Galadriel deck, I thought, hey, let's put in another Galadriel. So we're going to be adding Galadriel, Gift Giver, 3 and 2 green for a 4/4 Elf Noble. It says whenever Galadriel Gift Giver enters the battlefield or attacks, choose one. Put a 1/1 counter on another target creature. Create a food. Create a treasure. And the cool thing about that is it's going to happen on the ETB, and then every time you attack with her.
Yeah, flexible. Lets you get what you need in that moment.
Yeah. And hey, it's a Galadriel, so Galadriel on Galadriel.
Galadriel in Galadriel. I could see it. I did the same thing with Eowyn.
There you go.
Besides Galadriel, what else are you putting in the deck?
I wanted to go through, and since we are going to make this into more of a elf tribal deck, I mean, granted, there was already a lot of elves in this deck. It kind of, you need to be playing an elf at the beginning of your turn or before you go to combat. So I wanted to go through and just look around and add things that just bumped up all of our elves. So I added a ton of the elf lords. The first being Dwenin, Guiltleaf Dayan. They are 2 and 2 green for a 3/4 elf warrior. They have reach, and it says other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control. So it's going to pump up all your elves. It's going to help you gain some life when you're attacking. And I guess it's got reach, so that can kind of help. Also, we're throwing in Elfish Champion. It is 1 and 2 green for a 2/2 elf. It just says other elf creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Forest Walk. So if you're playing against people with Forest, they can't be blocking all your elves now, and they're going to get bigger. This is a great card. We're also adding in Imperious Perfect. It is 2 and a green for a 2/2 elf warrior. It says other elves you control get +1/+1. It also says pay green and tap it. Create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. You can kind of see a theme going on here. We're adding cards that bump all your elves up. And this one also creates elves, which is amazing.
Yeah, always going to get your commander to trigger.
Of course. And lastly, we're adding in Leaf Crowned Visionary. 2 green for a 1/1 elf druid. Other elves you control get +1/+1. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you may pay a green. If you do, draw a card. Again, bumping up the elves. Now you're able to draw cards off of every elf you cast. Fantastic.
Yeah, all 4 of these cards are really, really good elf lords.
That's why they're going in the deck, buddy.
Yeah, your team's going to get out of control very quickly, and I'm scared. Besides the lords, what else?
Well, I wanted to throw in some utility elves, and I thought these 4 were fantastic. So we're putting in Beast Whisperer for 2 and 2 green. It's a 2/3 elf druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So similarly to Leaf Crown Visionary, you're going to draw a card on all your creatures you're casting. But this one you don't have to do anything with. You cast your creature, you draw a card. It's a great card draw. We're also adding in Circle of Dreams Druid. It is 3 green pips for a 2/1 elf druid. It has tap, add 1 green for each creature you control. If you have a bunch of elves on the field, this card can tap for like 4 or 5. It can tap for a lot. We're also adding in Azuri, Renegade Leader. They are 1 and 2 green for a 2/2 elf warrior. You could pay a green, regenerate another target elf. You could also pay 2 and 3 green. Elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. So if someone's trying to target and kill your elves, you can protect them by regenerating them. And then also if you want to pump up your team and get through for lethal, pay the 5, make your team huge. The last utility elf I want to add in here is Priest of Titania. It is 1 and a green for a 1/1 elf druid. It says you can tap it, add 1 green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. So similar to Circle of Dreams Druid, if you have a bunch of elves on the field, this can tap for an absurd amount of mana.
Elves is the name of the game. I can see why you threw all these cards in the deck.
Yes, sir.
We've seen the lords. We've seen the utility. What are the big baddies we're throwing in here?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to think of a way just to push for lethal, because I know that if you go wide with a bunch of little things, that's going to be hard to win. So I wanted to throw in these couple of cards here just to kind of push it over the top. First being Allosaurus Shepherd. For 1 green mana, it's a 1/1 elf shaman. Allosaurus Shepherd can't be countered. Green spells you control can't be countered. But then that bottom text, 4 and 2 green. Until end of turn, each elf creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 and becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other creature types. The cool thing about this card is the base power is going to be the 5/5. So any counters you have on your creatures will go on top of those 5/5. So basically, you're just going to be turning all your elves into dinosaurs and then smashing.
Yeah, that's Allosaurus Shepherd used to be a very expensive card back in the day when it was first printed. It's come down in price quite a bit, but it's still so good. Having all your stuff not be able to be countered is so good on turn 1.
Really good. And it's an elf, so it'll count for your commander. And then the next one we're going to be adding in is Craterhoof Behemoth. 5 and 3 green for a 5/5 beast. It has haste, and it says whenever Craterhoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. I'm sure people have seen this card before. You get a big board, you play this card, your big board gets even bigger, and you probably win the game.
Yeah, this Craterhoof is dropping a crater on the battlefield. It's insane.
Yes. Fantastic for any kind of go wide strategy.
All right, we've seen all the creatures. What else besides creatures are we adding into the deck?
I wanted to throw in a planeswalker that cared about elves, so we're putting in Freyalise, Llanowar's Fury, for 3 and 2 green, with a starting loyalty of 3. The first ability is a +2. It says put a 1/1 green elf druid creature token onto the battlefield with tap, add a green to your mana pool. The next ability is a -2, destroy target artifact or enchantment. And the ultimate is a -6. Draw a card for each green creature you control. So this is going to allow you to activate your commander every turn by creating an elf, which is awesome. It's got a little bit of removal with artifact or enchantments. And then that ult, if you can ever get to it, you're just going to draw a ton of cards.
Yeah, but we all know you're just going to keep plussing this just to make your commander go crazy.
We all know that, yeah. You're correct.
A great planeswalker to throw into an elf tribal deck. Speaking of tribal, how about an artifact that helps with that?
Yeah, I was very shocked. So the human deck got Vanquisher's Banner, but we didn't in the elf deck, which is weird. So I'm putting in Vanquisher's Banner. 5 generic mana for an artifact. As the Vanquisher's Banner enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, draw a card. So you're naming elves, you're going to cast elves, draw cards, They're going to get buffed. And you even have the new art from Lord of the Rings. So if you want to stay on flavor, go ahead and pick up the new Lord of the Rings art for this card. Fantastic ad.
And of course, nothing is a Precon upgrade unless we touch the mana base. What are we doing with the mana base?
The mana base is actually not horrible for the deck, but I did want to add a couple cards here. So we're adding in, I'm going to put in Bark Channel Pathway. It's the pathway where you can play on the green side or the blue side, and it's just fantastic because it comes in untapped. I'm putting in Waterlogged Grove and Yavimai's Coast. Waterlogged Grove, it says you can tap it, pay a life, add a green or a blue. You can also pay one, tap it, sacrifice the Waterlogged Grove, draw a card. Seems really good. It'll also come into untap for you, so that's fantastic. Yavimai's Coast is similar. You can tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool. You can also tap it to add a green or a blue mana to your mana pool, but the card deals 1 damage to you. I just like them because they come in untapped and they're pretty solid choices.
Those are some great additions when it comes to the mana base. Are those going to be all of the additions for the upgrade?
That's the $100 upgrade. Additions, at least, yeah.
Alrighty then. Let's move on to the removals. The sad part. We got to get rid of some cool new art. What are you cutting out from this deck?
Yeah, so since we're going to be sticking strictly to the elf theme, the first pass I did for removals, we're just kind of going through and looking at cards that, one, weren't elves, and two, just kind of either were super expensive or didn't really help the elf theme very much. The first of which is Hornet Queen. 4 generic and 3 green for a 2/2 insect. It has flying, it has death touch, and it says, when it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. Now this is a solid card, but it doesn't say anything about elves, and it doesn't really go at all with our theme, so I cut it. We're also going to be cutting Colossal Whale, 5 generic and 2 blue for a 5/5 whale. It's got Island Walk, and it says whenever Colossal Whale attacks, you may exile a target creature defending player controls until Colossal Whale leaves the battlefield. I get that it's like a big fatty, I guess, that will be unblockable if we have a blue, but it's not an elf, and it doesn't really care about anything that we're doing in the deck. We're also getting rid of Mirkwood Elk, 5 generic and a green for a 6/6 elk. It has trample, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, return target elf card from your graveyard to your hand. You gain life equal to that card's power. That seems pretty solid. It's not an elf, but it does help you get your elves back. But a lot of what we're going to be doing is low to the ground or elves that kind of just make more elves. So I don't think we need to have this ability in the deck right now.
Yeah, all 3 of these cards. Not elves. Big mana costs. Get them gone.
Yep. These next couple of cards, they are elves, but I just think that they didn't do enough for you. And the elves that I'm adding in were way better. So we're going to be cutting Elvish Visionary, 1 generic and a green for a 1/1 elf shaman. When Elvish Visionary enters the battlefield, draw a card. It's cool. It's a one-time effect. We have no way to flicker, so it's just going to be entering the battlefield, drawing you the 1 card, and then I guess sitting around as a 1/1 body that we will hopefully grow. But I just think that other cards that we're adding in are going to be way stronger than this card, so I cut it. We're also going to be cutting Farhaven Elf, 2 and a green for a 1/1 elf druid. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. So it is a bit of a ramp. That's cool. After that, it doesn't do anything for you again. I just think that this deck really is not going to struggle with ramp. You have a lot of elves that will tap for mana for you, and your mana base is pretty solid, so I don't think you need this card. We're also getting rid of Wood Elves, 2 generic and a green for a 1/1 elf scout. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a forest card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So that's basically the last card we just talked about. Doing it again. Didn't think we needed it before. Still don't think we need it now.
Very minimal effects for all these elves.
Yeah, I honestly think that the elves we're throwing in leaps and bounds better. The fact that these just come in and do the one thing for you, where what we're adding are going to be doing something over and over and over, much more strong. This next one was a bit of a harder cut just because I know that it is part of the lore and it's, thematically makes sense. But we're cutting Radagast, Wizard of Wilds, 2 generic, a green and a blue for a 3/5 Avatar Wizard. He has Ward 1. He also says beasts and birds you control have Ward 1. And it says whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, choose one. Create a 3/3 green beast creature token, or create a 2/2 blue bird creature token with flying. This kind of felt like it was going to be more aligned with the other backup commander. So if you're playing Gandalf, this card would make a lot more sense because you're probably going to be casting bigger spells. But we don't really have that many big spells in the deck. He also doesn't create elves or is an elf, so I cut him out.
Goodbye, Radagast. Well, those are all the creatures you cut out of the deck. How about some instant or sorceries?
Yeah, I went through the instant sorceries and kind of chopped a couple that I didn't think totally fit. The first being Lorien Revealed. 3 generic and 2 blue for a sorcery. Draw 3 cards, and it has Island Cycle. So you can discard this card and search your library for an island card, reveal it, put in your hand. This just seems really expensive to draw 3 cards. We have other ways to draw. We actually have a lot of other ways to draw, and this just didn't seem like it hit the mark.
Yeah, your commander can also potentially draw you a card too.
Yeah. We're also cutting Sylvan Offering. It is X and a green for sorcery. It says choose an opponent. You and that player each create an XX green tree folk creature token. It also says choose an opponent. You and that player each create X11 green elf warrior creature tokens. This is cool. It does create you an elf, but it's also helping your opponent quite a bit. And I don't think I want to help my opponent quite a bit. So I think the other ways that we're creating elves in this deck are much better than this one.
Agreed.
I'm going to be cutting Travel Through Caradhras. It is 5 generic and a green for a sorcery. It's got Council's Dilemma. Starting with you, each player votes for Redhorn Pass or Mines of Moria. For each Redhorn's Pass vote, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you search your library this way, shuffle. For each Mines of Moria vote, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Exile, Travel Through Caradhras. I don't know. It just didn't seem that great, honestly. Again, I get that we're possibly going to be searching for lands and ramping it quite a bit, but at 6 mana, you probably don't need that much ramp already. And maybe I don't think your opponents are going to want you to be returning stuff from your graveyard to your hand. So I don't know. I cut it. I didn't like it.
Yeah, if someone played this against me, I would always vote for Redhorn Pass.
Yeah, just give them more land at 6. You're like, cool, here you go.
Give them more land here. I don't care.
Yeah. Similarly to the last card, I'm also going to be cutting another card that's caring about voting. We're going to be cutting Sail into the West. 2 generic, a green and a blue for instant. It has Will of the Council. Starting with you, each player votes for Return or Embark. If Return gets more votes, each player returns up to 2 cards from their graveyard to their hand. Then you exile Sail into the West. If Embark gets more votes, or the vote is tied, each player may discard their hand and draw 7 cards. Now this card is very thematic and very cool, but I don't know. I didn't really want to go too much into the voting lane. I know that your commander already does it, and I think that we can have our commander do it reliably. But after that, I wasn't too high on the whole voting mechanics.
Yeah, it makes sense to cut these 2 voting cards out of the deck. So we saw you add Vanquisher's Banner and Artifact. Are we removing an artifact to make room for it?
We are. We're going to be cutting Mirror of Galadriel. 2 generic for a legendary artifact. You can pay 5, tap this card, scry 1, then draw a card. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. It just seemed like a very slow draw. I get that it'll be cheaper, but we're probably not going to be casting a ton of legendary creatures. A lot of them are going to be either tokens that are being created or just normal rares. So I didn't think this card was that helpful in the deck.
Yeah, at its absolute worst, after a board wipe, it's 5 mana to scry 1 draw. That's not good value.
Nah.
And finally, we talked about changing the mana base. What are we removing?
So out of the box, this deck has 38 lands. I think that's a bit high on top of the elves that are going to be tapping for mana. So I am going to be cutting 4 lands, even though I added those 3 lands. So we're going to be dropping the land from 38 to 37. And the first land we're cutting is Ash Barrens. It can tap for a colorless, and it has basic land cycling for 1. This card is kind of the one that I always cut almost right away. I'm never a big fan of this card. Just get it out of my deck.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also cutting Woodland Stream. It enters the battlefield tapped, and then it can tap for a green and a blue. It's just slow. There's no reason for it to be in the decks, though, with the 2 that we're adding. Same goes for Thornwood Falls. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you gain a life when it enters the battlefield. It'll tap for a green and a blue. And we're also getting rid of Lonely Sandbar. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap for a blue, and it has cycling for a blue. I know Precons always like to try to cut costs and add all the tap lands, but when you're upgrading, dude, get rid of the tap lands. Add untapped. We're also going to be cutting the Lonely Sandbar because if you've noticed, by a lot, I mean all of my ads are green, so I don't think we're going to need as much blue.
That makes sense, man. A lot of the good elves are just green.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to do it? Is that your entire upgrade?
That is it. All the cuts on the ads.
All right. So we gave you $100 to upgrade the Elven Council deck. What is the total amount of money you spent on all of your additions?
At the time of the recording, all these cards will total up to about $95.
All right. You hit it right underneath the $100 mark. You saved the people some money.
Yes, sir.
Any final thoughts on the deck itself? How's it play and what you think about it before we wrap things up?
I think this is going to be a really fun elf deck. I know that there are also a lot of other strong elf commanders out there. This is going to be a really interesting elf deck to play. It is going to be dealing with the ring tempting you, a mechanic we've never played with before yet. So I'm very excited to see how that kind of plays into the deck. So, you know, it might turn out that that mechanic is very strong and your opponents will never want to vote and give you that, which is probably fine because I think just still drawing a card every turn for free seems solid. Just adding that into a elf go wide deck. So I'm very excited to play this deck.
Yeah, the ring tempting you is going to be a mechanic that is going to be interesting to see in our 100 and then the 300. Because if it goes well in our $100 upgrade, we'll see if we change strategies in our 300.
That's very, very true. And I'm sure if it goes well in the 100, the 300 gameplay will be very different because people just might not let you get tempted.
It's true. But that is going to do it. Comment down below if you guys liked this deck. Let Shane know if you would have added anything different. Maybe you would have taken something out that's different. Let us know. We love reading the comments. Also, if you want to check out this full deck, check the description where you're going to find the link to the Mox Field where you can go ahead and play test this deck yourself. Take a look at the entire deck. While you're in the description, you'll find links to our Instagram, our Twitter, and our TikTok. That's at Guys the Magic for each one. Follow us on there as well. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next video, hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.
Bye bye.